You can find them on Twitter, you can find them on the gram. After listening to their podcast, you'll be sitting there like, damn, taking their teaching from one level to the next, reaching up to Canada and down to Mexico.
Let's kind of get into mindfulness.
Gotta go.
And I guess we can start with like, just maybe can you talk about some mindfulness activities that anybody could start using, you know, in a classroom, listen to the podcast, and then tomorrow go in and start, you know, doing a mindfulness activity with their students?
Sure. I think, you know, mindfulness intimidates people, or anything new can be intimidating, right? Like, where am I supposed to find the time for this? Or how am I supposed to do it? Or how do I get the kids to buy in? And I think we don't ever want to pigeonhole ourselves, right? Like, I think people have this misconception that mindfulness means meditation, or mindfulness means that we have to be quiet and still all the time. So there's a lot of different ways to infuse it into the classroom. I mean, just starting with breathing exercises, you know, let's take 3 deep breaths before we start talking about this subject. You know, before, maybe your do now for the day is sit at your desk and, you know, trace your finger in different shapes on your desk, you know, and that kind of connection. Because I think just remembering mindfulness is, I like to explain it to the kids, is being where your hands are, right? So like if my hands are in the room listening to the teacher, my mind should be in the room listening to the teacher. Or if my hands are taking a test, that's where my mind should be focused. You know, so whatever way we can kind of ground kids into being present, you know, and that's the key concept of mindfulness. So if it's just tracing different letters, you can Google finger labyrinths, right, to kind of print out with your students and having them do that. Mindful coloring is great. You know, I wish I had thought of mindful coloring books, because I probably could retire by now.
Yeah, no kidding. Right?
Well, are those like the really small, what are they called? Mandalorian, right? Or
Mandalas.
Mandalorian,
Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
I guess you could do a Mandalorian mindfulness coloring.
Oh, that would be cool.
But I mean, they have so many different coloring books out there, and they have them for younger kids. And, you know, I used to use it as a principal when students would get in trouble in class. They would come to my office, and I'd put, you know, color pencils in front of them and some coloring. And the teachers would say to me, like, well, you're rewarding them. And I'm like, no. Like, we need to get them settled, and we need to get them to kind of self-regulate before I can have a conversation about the consequences. Right. And coloring has a chance to do that. Coloring is not for everybody, because if you have that kid who, as soon as they color out of the lines, is going to be extremely frustrated, right? Like, and that's the thing about mindfulness too, is finding things that are good for all kids. You could do some mindful movement. Even with COVID right now, just having the kids at their desk, do some yoga poses, or just kind of stand up and breathe in and breathe out. Doing those things, you know, there are some great apps and things you can find too, right? So if it intimidates you to lead those activities, we joked about Calm not being free anymore. Headspace is now free for educators. Okay. And Stop, Breathe, and Think is an entire curriculum that's free for educators.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So you can go and download those apps. They call it, you know, a free lifetime membership or a free premium membership. They make it sound really fancy, but being able to do that as well. But again, you know, there's mindful movement, there's mindful snacking, there's mindful listening. You know, let's all be quiet. I used to do this with my kids, and it sounds like the glorified, you know, silent game, but I did this with middle school and high schoolers. Let's all just be quiet for 10 seconds, for a minute, and listen and tell me 10 things that you can hear as a class.
Wow.
Right. And like, suddenly they start hearing so-and-so shuffled their foot. Right. So-and-so cleared their throat, you know, or I heard the other teacher in the other classroom talking. But it become, you know, I think anytime you can add a level of competition or gamify different things that you're doing too, helps. I know I'm just like throwing all these different things out there.
That's it. I mean, that's
it's all being recorded. So it's awesome.
There you go. You can take notes.
Yeah. And we do a wakelet for each episode. So we'll put links to different things. And thanks for listening to the Teacher Nerds podcast. Keep up with every new episode by subscribing on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, or anywhere you listen. Remember to visit teachernerds.com, and that's nerds with a Z. Follow us on Twitter @TeacherNerds and on Instagram @TeacherNerdsPodcast. And thank you for being one of the Teacher Nerds.